Welcome CSE 235 to ex7. This is our intro to Bootstrap, and it's really hard to teach Bootstrap because it's a framework. So we're just going to work with Bootstrap and try to become familiar with it and become familiar with its world, with its language, with its terms. And that's why I had you watch some videos. Hopefully you watched some of those videos already, all of the videos, to get familiar with Bootstrap, what it does, how it works a little bit. And then we're going to get in and start coding. And that's the only way to really get comfortable with it and to know what it does and to see if it can help you. And again, you should know HTML and CSS before you do it because it's really using CSS in here. It has pre-built classes that it's using. So let me just show you something here. We're going to work with Brad Traversy's mock-up that he's doing here. So that's one of the videos that I have. Now I'm going to have you go through it. I'm not going to do everything he's doing because I want you to go through it and start working with it. I don't know if we'll do the whole thing. So far I only have 2 parts of it. It's like an hour and 18 minutes. And you know, he's pretty serious. He has 2.15 million subscribers. So he knows his stuff. He knows how to show Bootstrap better than I do. I probably haven't used Bootstrap in 6 years or so. And it takes time to get familiar with everything and the way it works. You do have your resources here for Bootstrap that I'll go over a little bit just to show you what's going on here. So I'll try to guide you a little bit, but I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'll let you do that with Brad. I mean, he's the man. He has that many subscribers. He has almost 100,000 views of this alone. And this is fairly new, but he goes through it and he just kind of does stuff, and he doesn't explain things as much as you might want if you're a beginner with Bootstrap in particular. He's a very good teacher, but there's a lot of stuff I think he might assume people know already, and it's really hard to explain all that stuff. So I'm going to try to explain some of that as you work through it. But a couple things I just want to point out. I started working on it, so here's mine. This is what I have so far, and this basically has the nav area, the nav bar, and it has this showcase area, which has an image. It has a headline, it has a subheadline, it has a button. You can see there's rollovers. All of this stuff is pre-built into Bootstrap. Even the rollovers here, the text, the font, all that. You don't have to specify any of that. When I go into CSS, there's nothing here other than the default that's there. So all the CSS is built into Bootstrap, and you have to know what that stuff is. And there's a lot of defaults, and you can customize it. But right now, we're not going to do a whole lot of customizing. We're just going to kind of use it as is, and that's what we're doing. Even though I customize it, I customize that color there by using one of their default colors, which is primary. So I just want to point out some things here in the code. Here's where it starts with this navbar, and there's a class of navbar, and then there's navbar expand large, there's BG dark, there's navbar dark. So there's all these classes that are built in. Then there's a container -SM, which means it's going to end bigger. It's going to work mobile first. So it's going to be designed for mobile and then expand out from there. So the way we've done media queries, we kind of work on a desktop size, and then we do media queries for when it gets mobile. This is mobile first. So a couple things here. There's a container. There's a navbar brand, text primary. And you might think, what the hell does that mean? That's this thing. That's navbar brand. And if you don't know what that is, you could go down into the Bootstrap resources and you could look up typography, and you'll find some things here about headings and H1s and all that. And there's also something called brand. Now actually brand is actually navbar, so I'd have to go to navbar up here. Where's navbar? Here's navbar down here. So if I go into navbar, I'll go down here and I'll find things like navbar brand, navbar nav, navbar toggler, all that kind of stuff you're going to see in here. Navbar brand, text primary, what does that mean? That's actually a color. So if you go back to the resources and you look up colors, here's color. And if you go down here, you'll see body, secondary, tertiary. Here's primary. So it's that blue color. So I just put the blue color in there. It didn't have that in the video. He doesn't use that, but I used it because there's blue here and there's blue there. Now this is the primary color as well. So all this stuff is set up, the black background, even this headline here, when he does the video, he puts in a span of warning. The yellow color is a warning. So in that area, there's, oh, here it is down here, span class text warning. That's below the navbar. So text warning actually gives it that color. So if you didn't have that color in there, or if we didn't have that in there, it would just be white. So everything's kind of set up, and you could do some modifications to it. But I think as you work through it, you'll start to get familiar with some of this. But you do have to look at this. You do have to look at color. You have to look at columns. Have to look at everything. So I'm going to try and guide you that way, so that when something's in here that says nav-item, navbar-toggler, Brad won't explain it that well, but you should know where to go, at least see it. Then you can look it up yourself and see what it is. And there's no other way to get familiar with it other than just doing it and looking at this stuff. It's not something that's going to happen in one exercise, two exercises. That's why we're just going to work through something, and you'll start to see how it works. And if you ever get in a situation where you're going to use Bootstrap, you'll kind of get the idea. Now, we're just using things from the CDN, so we're doing it from the web, but you can download all the styles and actually use them and modify them yourself. If you ever worked with WordPress, you could download the style sheet and actually modify the style sheets for WordPress themes. Now, there are themes for Bootstrap. We're not using one right now. We're just kind of using basic setup here. But it's kind of based on a basic kind of layout. So we're going to work with what he has set up here. It's a pretty cool layout when you look at the beginning of what he has, and or the kind of mock-up layout. And we'll go through as much as we can here. We're not going to be able to go through everything, but we're going to start working through it, and then I'll explain some things to you. I'll get you started too, so that we can get these images in here. I downloaded these images. You can throw them in an IMG folder. We can put our links in here. I'll get you started with that so that you have your original links. Here's the links. Here's the one to the CSS, and here's the link to the JavaScript. So, or the JavaScript, I'm sorry, is down at the bottom. Here's the link to the JavaScript, the .js. So those are the two links that you'll use, and you can do this right in Replit. So we're going to do that, and we're going to get familiar with Bootstrap as best we can. Now watch those other videos first, and then you're going to start working through this, but I'll get you started. So don't just dig in yet. I'll get you started so you could start in Replit and then know how to get started with this thing. Then you could dig into this and kind of go at your own pace a little bit. And then if you have questions or if I have comments, I'll kind of add that to it. But for this video, I just wanted to give you a little overview of what we'll be doing. So make sure you watch all those other videos. I know some of them are a little longer, but try to get as familiar as you can with Bootstrap, and then we'll start digging into it. And then I guarantee you, by the time we get to the middle part, like the first part, you'll be like, what is this navbar, nav, and all that? It's just going to seem very monotonous, and it won't make any sense. But by the time you start working on the showcase, there's some things in here that you'll kind of understand, and you'll realize, even watching his video, that you can customize some things in here. And you could even try little things like changing the color and changing the size a little bit. You know, just things like there's a part here that says lead. Where is that? Lead, MY-4. What the hell does that mean? Well, lead is like a lead up headline. It's a paragraph that's kind of a leading paragraph. And MY means margin on the Y axis, and 4 is the amount. Text warning means yellow. So all these things mean something. It's just a whole other language that you have to get familiar with, and they use this kind of dash syntax with everything that's built in. And you could go through and, you know, find everything. It's a lot of memorization, but it's best to just kind of work with it, or work with a template first, and then get familiar with some of the resources in there. You know, just the basic things you've used in regular HTML and CSS, and learn how to do it here. And then eventually, if you're doing things like accordions and all kinds of things in here, and they actually use Flexbox, which is nice. So we use Flexbox a little bit in CSC 230, so we'll use it here. So they base a lot of their columns and their layout on Flexbox. So all that stuff we're going to do in here, and get familiar with Bootstrap a little. We're not going to be experts at Bootstrap. We're not going to design a whole lot with Bootstrap, but I think it's something that you need to be familiar with to decide if you're going to use that further, because it's fairly easy. You know, like Brad says, it's not in terms of learning a language. It's just a lot of memorization and getting familiar with it. So that's what we're going to try to do with this little thing. And rather than create something completely new, we'll just work with his. He won't mind. So we'll do that. And in the name of education, we'll just kind of work through this a little bit and get familiar with it just for this unit. Again, we're not doing a whole Bootstrap course. We're just learning about Bootstrap a little bit. So we're going to do this by going through his a little bit, and I'll just have you do that. I'm not going to go and redo all the code that he's doing. There's no reason to do that. And we'll get started in part 2. I'll get you started in Replit. So that'll be our ex7 for Bootstrap.